Welcome to Podcasts. A homeless man gets into a brawl on a New York City subway, gets hauled into the precinct, and then gets bailed out by a billionaire he has never met in his life. And that is literally just the cold open. Today, we are doing a full, spoilers-included walkthrough of Person of Interest Season 1, starring Jim Caviezel. By the end of this episode, you will know exactly how the season's story unfolds, who the key players are, and why that finale twist is still one of the most jaw-dropping season enders in CBS history. Joining me to break it all down is someone who has gone deep on this show, so let's get into it. What is the actual premise here? Because on paper, it sounds almost too wild to work.
So the core of it is this. Harold Finch, played by Michael Emerson, is a reclusive billionaire software genius who built a computer system for the U.S. government after September 11, 2001. The system monitors all electronic communications and surveillance video feeds to predict future terrorist activities. According to Wikipedia's breakdown of the season, the machine also identifies perpetrators and victims of other premeditated deadly crimes. But here's the thing. The government considers those irrelevant.
Wait, irrelevant? Like, the government just doesn't care?
Exactly. And this is where it gets really interesting. Finch actually programs the machine to delete that irrelevant information every night, but he also secretly programs it to notify him of those numbers. So he's essentially running a shadow operation using the government's own surveillance tool to save the people the government decided weren't worth saving.
That is such a loaded moral setup. The government built the thing, but Finch is the one actually using it for good.
Right. And to do that, he needs muscle, which is where John Reese comes in, played by Jim Caviezel. Per the Wikipedia season summary, Reese is a former Special Forces soldier and CIA operative who is burnt out and presumed dead, living as a vagrant in New York City. Finch finds him, bails him out of jail, and offers him a choice: keep drinking himself to death on the streets or help save people.
And Reese says yes, obviously.
He does, though skeptically. And that skepticism is kind of the engine of the early episodes. The show premiered on September 22, 2011 on CBS, ran 23 episodes total through May 17, 2012, and was created by Jonathan Nolan, with J.J. Abrams producing. The season started with a 13-episode order and kept getting extended. They added a 9-episode back order in October 2011, and then one more episode in March 2012.
So the network kept wanting more. That's a good sign.
It really was. The series premiere pulled 13.33 million viewers with a 3.1 out of 8 ratings share in the 18 to 49 demographic, and it won its time slot. By the end of the season, the average was 14.34 million viewers, which ranked it as the 13th most watched series of the entire season, according to Wikipedia.
Okay, so people were watching, but what did critics think? Because I know the reception was a little complicated early on.
Yeah, it's a really interesting arc. Metacritic gave Season 1 a 66 Metascore, generally favorable, with 54% positive reviews, 42% mixed, and only 4% negative. The San Francisco Chronicle gave it a perfect 100, calling it something that engages a post-9/11 sense of paranoia in its viewers. But some critics, like one at Rotten Tomatoes, called it stalking, not detective work, because there are no clues to tease out.
Ha! That's a fair critique, honestly. You're just watching someone watch someone.
And Newsday compared it to Minority Report, which is actually pretty apt. But what's interesting is that according to Sci-Fi Dimensions, critics initially dismissed it as another generic police procedural like CSI or Law & Order with a tech twist. The first season was specifically criticized for its reliance on self-contained episodes and sometimes cliched dialogue.
So it was a slow burn critically. The audience was there before the critics fully came around.
Exactly. And that case of the week structure is really what defines the first half of Season 1. Each episode, Finch gives Reese a social security number, a person of interest, and they have to figure out if that person is a victim or a perpetrator. They don't know which. That's the central tension every single week.
Walk me through some of the early episodes, because I think that structure is actually kind of genius when you lay it out.
So the pilot sets everything up. Reese's first case is figuring out what danger a young assistant district attorney named Diane Hansen is facing. And right away, you get two characters who will be central all season. Detective Carter, played by Taraji P. Henson, who is hunting Reese and is not a fan of vigilantes, and Detective Fusco, played by Kevin Chapman, who is a corrupt cop who ends up in Reese's orbit.
Carter and Fusco are such a great contrast. One is chasing Reese for the right reasons, the other is being coerced by him.
Totally. And then episode 2, Ghosts, is where the show starts doing something more interesting. The machine spits out a social security number that belongs to a teenage girl named Teresa Whitaker, who was murdered 2 years ago. So Finch and Reese are chasing a ghost, and it forces them to ask, what does the machine know that they don't? According to TV Maze's episode guide, they eventually discover she might still be alive.
That's a great hook for episode 2. It immediately breaks the formula it just established.
Right. And episode 3, Mission Creep, has Reese going undercover with a group of Army veterans who are committing bank heists to cover their debts. The POI is a young ex-Marine named Joey Durbin. And per Poji Design's episode guide, this is also the episode where Carter starts to realize that Reese isn't the cold-blooded killer she initially thought he was.
So Carter's arc is shifting even this early.
It is. And that's one of the things the Person of Interest wiki specifically calls out as a major Season 1 plotline. Carter's search for Reese, her mysterious man in the suit, culminating in her discovering who he and Finch actually are. And as she learns more, she reluctantly gets pulled into their activities.
Let's talk about Jim Caviezel for a second, because his casting is kind of fascinating. He had a very specific career trajectory before this show.
Yeah, and the Person of Interest wiki has some really interesting background on him. He was born September 26, 1968, in Mount Vernon, Washington. He was actually accepted to Juilliard, but turned it down when he was cast as Kevin Costner's youngest brother in Wyatt Earp. And then he nearly gave up acting entirely before Terrence Malick called him to be in The Thin Red Line in 1998.
So he almost wasn't an actor at all. That's wild.
And then, of course, he became known for very intense, almost obsessive characters. The wiki literally notes that the characters he's portrayed tend to be intense, bordering to the point of obsession, which makes John Reese a perfect fit. Reese is a man who has lost everything and channels all of that into this singular mission.
The Boston Herald actually called Caviezel and Emerson one of Fall's most formidable odd couples when the show premiered. That chemistry is real.
It absolutely is. And the show leans into that contrast hard. Finch is the brain, reclusive, methodical, morally conflicted about what he built. Reese is the body, a weapon that Finch is trying to aim at the right targets. And Season 1 is really about whether that partnership can actually hold.
Okay, so let's get into the bigger season-long arcs, because it's not just Case of the Week. There's a lot happening underneath.
So the Person of Interest wiki lays out the major Season 1 plot lines really clearly. You've got the Reese-Finch partnership developing. You've got Reese's history with a woman named Jessica Arndt, contrasted with his CIA past and his encounters with Kara Stanton. You've got the early history of the machine itself, including Finch's work with his partner Nathan Ingram and a government figure named Alicia Corwin.
And then there's the organized crime layer.
Yes, the emergence of New York's organized crime, specifically a character named Carl Elias and a corrupt police unit called HR. Episode 7, Witness, is where Elias really starts to come into focus. Reese and Finch are trying to save a school teacher who witnessed a mob hit, and meanwhile Carter and Fusco are pursuing this mysterious Carl Elias who is implicated in the death of the man the teacher saw killed.
And Fusco's arc is interesting because he starts as a corrupt cop, right? He's not a good guy at the start.
Exactly. The wiki specifically calls out Reese's recruitment of a reluctant Fusco to monitor HR and his transformation from a corrupt cop to an honest one as a key Season 1 plotline. Fusco appears in 19 of the 23 episodes. He's being squeezed from both sides, Reese is using him as an inside man, and HR is still expecting his loyalty.
Episode 9, Get Carter, is a big one. That's when Carter herself becomes the person of interest.
That's a turning point. The machine gives Reese and Finch Carter's number, and they realize that Carl Elias has hired someone to kill her. So now the woman who has been hunting Reese all season is the one he has to protect. According to Poji Design's episode guide, they have to deal with multiple suspects while keeping Carter alive, and she doesn't even know she's being protected.
That's such a good structural move. The hunter becomes the hunted, and the vigilante she's been chasing is the only one who can save her.
And then episode 10, Number Crunch, escalates things further. The machine gives them 4 numbers at once, and one of the persons of interest is already dead when they get there. Meanwhile, Internal Affairs is investigating Carter for her involvement with the mystery man, and the CIA tells her they want Reese back. So the walls are closing in from multiple directions.
The CIA and FBI hunting Reese is its own whole thread, right? That's not just background noise.
Not at all. The wiki lists it as a dedicated plotline, the CIA and FBI's search for Reese, led by Mark Snow and Nicholas Donnelly, respectively. Reese is officially presumed dead, so both agencies have reasons to want him found. Snow is CIA and has a personal history with Reese. Donnelly is FBI and is methodically building a case. They're both closing in throughout the season.
And then there's Root, who doesn't show up until the very end but is clearly being set up.
Root is the wild card. The wiki lists the emergence of a mysterious hacker known only as Root as one of the Season 1 plotlines. And the way Root is introduced is genuinely one of the most clever villain reveals I've seen in a network drama.
Set it up. Because the finale, Firewall, is where it all lands.
So, Firewall is the 23rd and final episode of Season 1. It aired May 17, 2012, and according to the Person of Interest wiki, it drew 13.47 million viewers. The episode was written by Greg Plageman and Jonathan Nolan himself and directed by Richard J. Lewis.
Nolan writing the finale himself, that tells you how important this episode was to the season's shape.
Absolutely. So the setup is, the machine gives Reese and Finch the number of a psychologist named Caroline Turing. Reese goes undercover as her patient to protect her, but then he ends up trapped with her in a hotel with both an FBI team and a group of HR corrupt cops all trying to kill both of them.
So Reese is pinned down with the person he's supposed to protect, with enemies on both sides.
Right. And Finch enlists Zoe Morgan, a New York fixer introduced earlier in the season, to help. Reese eventually gets Turing to Finch, and then she reveals herself. She says, and this is the actual quote from the wiki, "So nice to finally meet you, Harold. You can call me Root."
She staged her own assassination.
She paid for her own hit, knowing it would draw out Reese and Finch. The entire episode, the hotel siege, the FBI, HR, all of it, was engineered by Root to get close to Finch. And then separately, a woman named Alicia Corwin, who is one of the 7 original government personnel who knew about the machine's existence, tries to kidnap Finch to destroy the machine. Root kills her.
So Root kills the one person who could have told Finch the most about the machine's history. That's not just a villain entrance, that's a statement.
And the finale ends with Carter and Fusco finally learning about each other's relationship with Reese. They've been operating in parallel all season without knowing it. And Reese, for the first time, asks the machine directly for help to find Finch and track down Root. That's the season-ending image, a man who started as a vagrant asking an AI to help him save his partner.
That is such a good full-circle moment. He came in with nothing, and now he's in a relationship with the machine itself.
And that's exactly what Screen Rant's analysis of the show points out, that Reese started as a homeless man with nothing to live for, and Finch gave him purpose. The whole season is about Reese finding something worth fighting for again. And by the finale, he's fighting for Finch specifically.
Let's talk about the critical arc for a second, because I think it's actually really relevant to how people should approach Season 1. Because if you go in expecting a prestige drama from Episode 1, you might bounce off it.
That's a fair warning. Skiff-Eye Dimensions specifically notes that the first season was criticized for its reliance on self-contained episodes and sometimes cliched dialogue, but they also note that the reception grew more positive as the season went on, with critics highlighting the exploration of mass surveillance and the repercussions of its actions, and the season finale particularly received acclaim.
So it's a show that earns its depth. You have to let it build.
Exactly. And one Rotten Tomatoes viewer review that stuck with me, someone writing in 2026 said, "The machine is an AI that watches everything. And years later, with AI in our daily lives, this show feels more relevant than ever." That's the thing about Season 1. It was prescient in 2011, and it's almost uncomfortably accurate now.
The show's slogan was literally, "Ever think you're being watched?" That hits differently in 2026.
It really does. And that's what the San Francisco Chronicle was picking up on when they gave it a perfect 100 at launch. They called it something that engages a post-9/11 sense of paranoia. The machine was built because of 9/11. It was a direct response to the idea that if we just had better surveillance, we could have stopped it. Season 1 is asking, okay, but what happens when that surveillance sees everything?
And the answer the show gives is, the government decides most of it doesn't matter. The irrelevant numbers.
Which is such a pointed critique. Finch didn't build the machine to ignore ordinary people. That was a policy decision made by the government. He just found a way around it. And that tension between institutional power and individual action is what drives every single episode of Season 1.
Let me ask you about something that I think gets overlooked, the Reese backstory episodes. Because Season 1 uses flashbacks pretty deliberately.
Yes, the wiki actually maps out which episodes have flashbacks and whose perspective they're from. The pilot flashes back to Reese's past. Episode 2 flashes back to Finch's. Episode 3 goes back to Reese again. Episode 9, Get Carter, flashes back to Carter. And then later in the season, you get flashbacks to Elias, to Finch and his partner Nathan Ingram, and to Reese's relationship with Jessica Arndt.
So the flashbacks are doing real character work, not just filling time.
They're building the emotional architecture of the show. Reese's history with Jessica Arndt is particularly important. The wiki calls it out as a key plotline, contrasted with his time in the CIA and his encounters with Kara Stanton. You're understanding why this man is the way he is, why he's so broken, why Finch's offer meant something to him.
And Finch's backstory, the machine's early history, his work with Nathan Ingram, that's laying groundwork for things that pay off much later in the series.
Season 1 is doing a lot of long game setup. The introduction of Zoe Morgan as a recurring collaborator, the emergence of Root, the establishment of HR as a corrupt police organization. All of these threads get picked up and expanded in later seasons, but Season 1 plants every seed.
What about the episode Foe, episode 8? That one feels a little different tonally.
It is different. According to Poggi Design, when Reese and Finch discover their latest POI has connections to Cold War Soviet espionage circles, they quickly learn how covert ops were handled in a world before the machine. It's almost a meditation on what Reese's world used to look like. Intelligence work without algorithmic assistance, just tradecraft and instinct.
So it's using the Case of the Week format to actually say something about Reese's past and what the machine represents as a change in how intelligence works.
Exactly. The best episodes of Season 1 do that. They use the procedural wrapper to deliver something thematic. Cura te ipsum, episode 4, is another one. The title means heal thyself in Latin. The POI is a workaholic ER physician named Dr. Megan Tillman, and while Reese and Finch are surveilling her, Fusco is separately dealing with a drug cartel that wants their money back.
The show is juggling a lot of plates, even in the early episodes.
And it mostly keeps them all spinning. Judgment, episode 5, has a judge's son kidnapped, and the judge refusing to accept Reese and Finch's help because he doesn't want to put his son in more danger. That's a great wrinkle, the person they're trying to help actively working against them.
That's a recurring tension in the show, right? People not wanting to be saved.
It is. And The Fix, episode 6, introduces Zoe Morgan, described as a secretive woman of uncertain occupation. She becomes Reese's occasional collaborator going forward. The wiki specifically lists her introduction as one of the Season 1 plot lines worth tracking.
So when you step back from all of this, 23 episodes, multiple interlocking arcs, a finale that recontextualizes the whole season, what is Season 1 of Person of Interest actually about at its core?
At its core, Season 1 is about what happens when a broken man is given a reason to exist again. Reese starts as someone the world has written off, presumed dead, living on the street. Finch gives him a mission, and through that mission, Reese starts to rebuild something. Not just his skills, but his sense of purpose. Every number they save is Reese proving to himself that he's still capable of doing good.
And the machine is almost like a third character in that dynamic.
It really is. And Season 1 is careful about how it portrays the machine. It's not a villain, it's not a savior, it's a tool that reflects the intentions of the people using it. Finch built it to protect people, the government used it to protect itself, and Reese uses it to protect individuals the system decided didn't matter. That's the whole show in 3 sentences.
Here's what this really comes down to. Season 1 of Person of Interest is doing something that a lot of procedurals don't bother with. It's building a world with real moral weight underneath the Case of the Week structure. And by the time you hit that finale, you realize every episode was a brick in a much larger building.
And the numbers back that up. The season ended with 14.34 million average viewers, more than it started with. Audiences were not just watching, they were coming back and bringing people with them. That doesn't happen with a show that's just going through the motions.
The Metacritic score of 66 at launch doesn't tell the whole story either. Because the critical consensus shifted as the season went on, Wikipedia specifically notes that reception grew more positive as the season progressed, with the finale receiving particular acclaim.
And that's actually a useful frame for anyone coming to Season 1 fresh. Give it the runway it needs. The first few episodes are establishing the rules. By the time you hit Witness and Get Carter and Number Crunch, the show has found its rhythm and the stakes feel genuinely high.
And then the finale drops Root on you and suddenly you realize the whole season was just the prologue.
That's exactly it. Root staging her own assassination, paying for her own hit, just to engineer a meeting with Finch is one of the most calculated villain introductions in network television. She didn't just show up. She built the entire scenario from scratch. And that tells you everything about who she is before she says a single word about herself.
And Reese ends the season by talking to the machine, a man who started with nothing, talking to an AI, asking it to help him save his partner. That's the arc.
Screen Rant's analysis puts it well. Finch gave Reese purpose by giving him a job. And by the end of season 1, Reese has internalized that purpose so completely that he's willing to go up against a dangerous hacker, a corrupt police unit, the FBI, and the CIA all at once to protect the man who saved him. That's not a procedural. That's a character study wearing a procedural's clothes.
That is a great way to put it. And it's why the show still has people writing 10 out of 10 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes in 2026, calling it totally rewatchable and more relevant than ever.
Because the questions it's asking, who gets to decide which lives matter? What do we give up when we accept total surveillance? Can a broken person be redeemed through service? Those questions don't have expiration dates.
Remember that cold open we started with? A homeless man bailed out of jail by a billionaire he's never met. By episode 23, that homeless man is asking an artificial intelligence to help him save the billionaire. That's the whole journey of season 1 in 2 images. And with that, thanks for being here. If you haven't watched Person of Interest season 1 yet, or if you're thinking about a rewatch, now you know exactly what you're walking into. Every number matters, even the irrelevant ones.